I think we are in the era of bolder government, and it comes about not so much because of a change in philosophy as much as a change in the nature of the problem we face. The largest problem that we face around the world, developed, developing, small, large countries, lies in the global commons, the accelerated deterioration of the global commons. It's not a global problem separate from what we face locally. It's a problem everywhere. It is a commons problem. And the scale with which we need to invest to address it, and the speed with which we need to invest, is one that requires all pools of capital, public, private, even philanthropic, all pools of capital. There's no conceivable future of solving this problem by relying on only the public sector, because it's far too expensive for the public sector alone. It can't rely only on the private sector because markets won't respond with the speed and scale required. So it requires all pools of capital. And one way of thinking about it is that if we don't address this with the speed and scale necessary, there's going to be a very sharp trade-off between growth and development on the one hand, and solving the climate challenge, the water crisis, and the biodiversity challenge on the other. In other words, there'll be a trade-off. You have to choose between one or the other. And there's a very real risk, particularly in the developing world, of a lost decade of growth being the price you pay in order to address the challenges of the global commons. Or alternatively, you don't proceed with mitigation, just say that this is a problem of the global north, and you carry on growing. And you don't need that trade-off, and we can't afford that trade-off between a lost decade of growth versus a lost decade of climate mitigation. We can avoid both, but it requires a higher level of investment for a longer period of time and delivered with some haste. And that requires the public sector to be part of the act, critically, because the markets will not respond with the speed and scale necessary. I wouldn't call it investor or first resort as such. I would call it the way in which the public sector can intelligently join forces with the private sector, draw in philanthropic capital where it's able to absorb real risk, and address this challenge jointly. First, both learning from past experience across a range of countries, including our own and several other countries in East Asia. For industrial policy to succeed, it has to be accompanied with social policies on an industrial scale. In other words, a systematic approach to developing human capital. And that requires, first and foremost, obviously, education systems that are for everyone, providing a high-quality education for everyone. But very importantly, in today's new environment, it requires a constant replenishing of skills. And it's very hard to get it right because you can't actually bet on specific skills that are going to be relevant 5 or 10 years from now. But you do know, broadly speaking, that digitization is going to be important. AI is going to be important. Robotization is going to be important. There's a whole set of green energies that are going to be important. And you know that there are clusters of skills required in each of these areas. You might not get it precisely right, but you can get it roughly right. And you've got to do that roughly right with some gusto. And it requires, again, the public sector to participate. It requires mobilizing employers, very importantly. And it requires motivating individuals. And that new generation of social policies, which not many countries are adopting, is, to my mind, extremely important. The replenishing through life of what you'd call human capital investment, but it's really investing in the skills of ordinary citizens. I think that's extremely important. And the countries that do pure industrial policy, encouraging an investor, foreign or local, to plonk a plant in a particular town and thinking you've succeeded there, will find over time that it's going to cost more and more because you don't have the skills ecosystem to sustain it, and you have to keep subsidizing. We should just keep in mind that we are way behind. We are way behind in the race against climate change and a broader crisis in biodiversity. And the way to tackle this is to rely on superior technologies and innovations wherever they come from and scale them up. Guard against unfair competition, unfair subsidies and the like, which many countries are guilty of, but choose the most superior technologies and scale them up regardless of which country they came from. That's going to give us the best chances of tackling a problem that we're still way behind in tackling.